My beloved child. A quiet truth has been moving toward this very moment for longer than you realize, and although the world around you may seem unchanged, something beneath the surface has already begun to shift. Not with noise, not with dramatic signs, but with the kind of change that starts in a single heart before it ever reaches another. There is a reason your attention settled here now instead of somewhere else. There is a reason these words found you while countless others passed by unnoticed. Don't skip, because what unfolds from this moment is not rushed, and it cannot be understood by reading only the beginning. Every piece belongs to the next, like footsteps appearing one after another across a quiet path. The person you love has been carrying emotions that never seem to find the right moment to be spoken aloud. Outwardly, they continued through ordinary days, smiling when expected, answering questions, finishing responsibilities, yet somewhere inside, another conversation never stopped. It was a conversation where your name appeared more often than anyone could guess. Not because they were searching for perfect words, but because every attempt felt smaller than what they truly wanted you to understand. There are moments in every life when silence is not the absence of feeling. It is simply the place where feelings grow too large for ordinary language. This is one of those moments. If you could stand quietly beside them without either of you speaking, you would notice the pauses that arrive before every decision, the thoughtful glances toward empty spaces, the way memories quietly interrupt even the busiest hours. Those small moments reveal far more than loud declarations ever could. Perhaps you have wondered why certain memories keep returning without invitation. Why familiar places suddenly carry unexpected meaning. Why ordinary evenings sometimes leave you reflecting on conversations that ended long ago. These are not answers by themselves. They are gentle reminders that some connections continue working quietly even when nothing seems to be happening on the outside. Stay till the end, because what appears to be distance is not always separation. Sometimes it is simply the time required for understanding to become clear enough that neither heart mistakes it when it finally arrives. The person you love has reached a place where pretending everything feels ordinary has become increasingly difficult. They have discovered that some emotions cannot remain hidden forever, not because someone forces them into the light, but because truth naturally seeks its own voice. Every passing day has made that realization a little stronger, a little clearer, a little harder to ignore. Yet this story is not about dramatic confessions or impossible promises. It is about something quieter. Something far more lasting. It is about the moment when someone realizes that protecting their feelings has started to hurt more than expressing them honestly. That realization changes everything long before a single word is spoken. Something important is waiting for you. But first, another unseen piece must fall gently into place. There is a memory the person you love keeps returning to again and again, a memory they have never shared with anyone. They believed it belonged only to them. They never imagined it would become the beginning of everything that follows. And when that hidden memory finally rises to the surface, the meaning behind their silent cry will become impossible to overlook. There is something remarkable about hidden memories. They never disappear simply because they are ignored. They wait with extraordinary patience, returning only when the heart is finally prepared to understand what they were trying to say all along. The memory resting inside the person you love has done exactly that. It has remained quiet, untouched by time, until these recent days began stirring it back to life in ways they never expected. It wasn't a grand occasion that awakened it. It wasn't an anniversary or a dramatic event. It was something beautifully ordinary. A familiar melody drifting through the air. A passing expression on someone else's face. The color of an evening sky that looked strangely familiar. In an instant, they were no longer standing where they were. Their thoughts had traveled back to a moment where you were simply being yourself, unaware that your smallest gesture would leave a mark lasting far longer than either of you imagined. What surprised them most was not the memory itself. It was the emotion that returned with it. They realized that time had changed many things around them, but it had never erased the way that single moment continued to live quietly inside their heart. Perhaps you have underestimated the impact you have had on someone's life. Most people do. They assume the unforgettable moments are the dramatic ones, yet hearts rarely work that way. More often, they treasure the gentle kindness no one applauded, the patient conversation everyone else forgot. The reassuring presence that arrived without asking for recognition. The person you love has begun seeing those forgotten moments differently now. They replay them with fresh understanding, noticing details they overlooked before. Every reflection seems to whisper the same quiet realization. I should have understood sooner. Those words have never been spoken aloud, yet they echo within them with surprising clarity. Don't skip, because this is where everything begins to shift. For the first time in a long while, they have stopped asking themselves what they should hide and started asking what deserves to be shared. That change may sound small, but it transforms the direction of every thought that follows. A guarded heart slowly becomes an honest one. An uncertain mind begins choosing clarity over hesitation. Still, there remains one final barrier. It is not pride. It is not distance. It is the simple hope that if they finally reveal what has been quietly growing inside them, the moment will not arrive too late to be understood. That hope has become stronger with every passing day. Even now, they find themselves imagining a conversation that has never happened. They quietly picture your reaction. They wonder whether you would recognize everything they struggle to express without words. They wonder if silence has already said more than either of you realized. Something important is waiting for you. Because while these thoughts have remained hidden within them, another unexpected moment has already begun unfolding, one they never planned for, one they could not predict. Very soon, someone will say a few simple words to the person you love, and those words will gently remove the last reason they have been holding back. When that happens, nothing inside their heart will feel quite the same again. A single conversation can begin long before the first word is spoken. It starts in quiet reflections, in questions no one else hears, in the gentle realization that carrying everything alone is no longer the answer. The person you love has entered that quiet place now, where silence feels less like protection and more like an invitation to finally be honest. In recent days, they have noticed something unusual. No matter how busy life becomes, their thoughts continue finding their way back to you. They may begin the morning focused on ordinary responsibilities, yet somewhere between one moment and the next, your memory quietly appears again, not demanding attention, simply waiting with remarkable patience. That surprised them. Because they once believed that enough time could soften every unanswered feeling. Instead, they discovered that genuine affection does not disappear because it is left unspoken. It simply becomes quieter, deeper, more thoughtful. Stay till the end, because the next realization changed everything inside them. One evening, while reflecting on everything that had been left unsaid, they asked themselves a question they had avoided for far too long. What if the opportunity I've been waiting for has been waiting for me too? That single thought refused to leave. It returned the following morning. It stayed with them through ordinary conversations. It lingered during quiet moments when no one else could see the thoughts moving behind their calm expression. For the first time, they stopped imagining what might go wrong and started wondering what could finally go right if they allowed honesty to take the place of hesitation. It wasn't certainty that changed them. It was hope. A gentle, steady hope that grew stronger each time they remembered the kindness you once showed without expecting anything in return. They began understanding that the moments they treasured most were never the loud ones. They were the peaceful conversations, the unnoticed encouragement, the quiet feeling that someone truly saw them without asking them to become someone else. Those memories have become impossible to ignore now. Every one of them seems connected by the same invisible thread. You. Not an idealized version of you. Not a perfect image. Simply the person whose presence continues bringing unexpected peace into their heart. Don't skip. Because while these reflections were unfolding, something happened that they never anticipated. Someone close to them noticed the change. Nothing obvious was said at first. Just a thoughtful smile, a quiet pause, the kind of look that seems to understand more than words ever reveal. Then came a gentle question. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't intrusive. Yet it reached directly into the place they had spent so long trying to protect. For a moment, they couldn't answer. Not because they didn't know the truth, but because speaking your name would have made everything suddenly feel real. That silence lasted only a few seconds. Yet within those few seconds, an important decision quietly began taking shape. The person you love realized they could no longer keep pretending that these feelings belonged only to the past. And just as they were about to respond, the other person softly shared something unexpected, something they had observed for much longer than anyone realized. Those quiet words became the beginning of a completely different chapter, one that neither of them saw coming. The most unexpected truths rarely arrive with urgency. They appear gently, almost unnoticed, until one simple sentence changes the way everything before it is understood. That is exactly what happened. The person sitting across from the one you love did not rush to fill the silence. They simply waited, allowing the quiet to speak first. Sometimes the greatest kindness is giving someone enough space to discover their own heart without interruption. Then, almost softly enough to be missed, they said, "You seem happiest whenever your thoughts wander to one particular person." Those words lingered. There was no immediate reply. Only a quiet smile that appeared for a moment before it faded again, as if they were trying to hide something that had already become impossible to conceal. In that brief silence, the person you love understood something they had never fully accepted before. Their feelings had become visible. Not because they had confessed them. Not because they had explained them. But because genuine affection has a quiet way of revealing itself through the smallest details. The warmth in someone's voice, the peaceful expression that appears without warning, the thoughtful pauses whenever one special name enters the conversation. Stay till the end. Because this realization opened a door they had kept closed for far too long. They stopped asking themselves whether their emotions were real. Instead, they began asking why they had waited so long to acknowledge them. Every unanswered message they had rewritten in their mind. Every conversation they imagined but never started. Every quiet hope they tucked away before anyone could see it. All of it suddenly felt connected, as though countless scattered moments had quietly formed a single picture. And in the center of that picture was you. Not because life had become perfect. Not because every question had disappeared. But because every honest reflection kept leading back to the same place. The person you love realized that some people become part of your inner world so naturally that you stop noticing how deeply they are woven into your everyday thoughts, until one ordinary conversation reveals what your heart has known all along. Don't skip. Because what happened next surprised even them. Later that evening, after returning home, they found themselves looking through small reminders they hadn't paid attention to in a long time. A familiar photograph. A meaningful message. A simple memory connected to an ordinary day. None of these things were extraordinary on their own. Yet together, they carried a quiet message. You've been more important than I allowed myself to admit. That realization didn't overwhelm them. It settled gently. Like sunrise replacing darkness, not suddenly, but steadily. And with that growing clarity came another thought, one they could no longer push aside. If I remain silent much longer, I may never say what truly matters. Those words echoed quietly within them. Not as regret. Not as pressure. But as a gentle invitation to choose honesty over hesitation. And just as they reached for something they had been meaning to revisit for a very long time, they noticed one small detail that made them stop completely. It was something connected to you. Something they had overlooked before. The moment they recognized its meaning, everything they thought they understood began to change once again. Some discoveries are not hidden because they are difficult to find. They remain unnoticed because the heart is not yet ready to recognize what has been quietly present all along. The person you love stood still for a long moment, holding that small reminder in their hands, realizing it had carried a meaning they had overlooked countless times before. It wasn't valuable because of what it was. It was valuable because of what it represented. A conversation that ended too soon. A smile that lingered longer than expected. A simple exchange that seemed ordinary then, yet now felt impossible to forget. As they reflected on it, they noticed something remarkable. Every memory they cherished shared one quiet detail. In every one of them, they felt completely at ease. There was no need to pretend. No need to impress. No need to become someone different. When your presence entered their thoughts, they remembered what it felt like to simply be themselves. That realization settled deeply. Many people spend years searching for places where they feel understood, but sometimes that feeling is connected to a single person rather than a destination. The person you love has begun to understand that difference, and it has changed the way they look back on every moment they once dismissed as ordinary. Don't skip. Because what happened next was not planned. As the evening grew quieter, they found themselves writing. Not a formal letter. Not a message they intended to send immediately. Just honest words flowing onto a page without worrying whether anyone else would ever read them. For the first time, they allowed every guarded thought to become visible. They wrote about missed opportunities. They wrote about conversations they wished had lasted a little longer. They wrote about how often your name had appeared in moments when no one else could possibly know. The page filled more quickly than they expected. Then their hand became still. One sentence remained unfinished. I wish you knew. They stared at those words for a long time. Not because they didn't know how to complete them, but because they realized the ending deserved more than ink on a page. It deserved to be spoken one day. Stay till the end. Because while they quietly folded that page and placed it aside, something within them had already changed. The hesitation that once felt permanent had become smaller. The uncertainty that once seemed overwhelming had begun giving way to quiet courage. Not loud courage. Not dramatic confidence. Just the peaceful kind that grows when someone finally stops arguing with their own heart. Yet there was still one unanswered question. How would they know when the moment was right? As if life had been listening all along, the answer didn't arrive through a grand sign. It came through an unexpected encounter the very next day. Someone they had not planned to meet looked at them with unusual warmth and shared a simple observation, one so accurate that it left them speechless before they could even respond. Those few words would become the final piece they never realized they were waiting for, and after hearing them, keeping everything inside would no longer feel possible. Morning arrived without fanfare, yet it carried a quiet sense that the day would not unfold like the ones before it. The person you love stepped into familiar routines, expecting nothing unusual, but there are days when the smallest encounters leave the deepest impressions. This became one of them. The unexpected meeting happened in the most ordinary setting. There were no dramatic entrances. No remarkable circumstances. Just a familiar face, an unhurried conversation, and a pause that seemed to last a little longer than either of them expected. The other person smiled gently before saying something that seemed almost effortless. You've been somewhere else lately. At first, the person you love laughed softly, hoping the comment would drift away. But it didn't. The conversation continued. You listen, but your thoughts always seem to return to the same place. Those words settled quietly between them. For a moment, they searched for an explanation that sounded simple enough to believe. None came. Because deep inside, they knew exactly where their thoughts kept returning. To you. Not because they had decided to think about you. Not because they were trying to hold on to the past. But because every path their heart followed seemed to circle back to the same quiet destination. Stay till the end. Because the next question reached even deeper. The other person tilted their head with a gentle smile and asked, have you ever told them what they truly mean to you? Everything became still. The sounds around them faded into the background. Time itself seemed to slow as those words echoed through every thought they had been avoiding. They opened their mouth to answer. Then closed it again. The silence revealed more than any explanation ever could. In that instant, they understood something that had been hidden in plain sight. They weren't waiting for the perfect opportunity. They had been waiting to feel brave enough. And perhaps bravery isn't the absence of uncertainty. Perhaps it is the quiet decision that some truths deserve to be spoken even when the outcome remains unknown. Don't skip. Because from that moment forward, they stopped imagining conversations as impossible dreams. Instead, they began imagining them as real moments that simply hadn't arrived yet. Their heart felt lighter. Not because every answer had appeared, but because carrying everything alone no longer felt necessary. Later that evening, as the day settled into silence once again, they unfolded the page they had written the night before. They read every word slowly. When they reached the unfinished sentence, "I wish you knew," they finally picked up the pen again. This time, they didn't hesitate. One final line appeared beneath it. A line so simple, yet so honest, that the moment they finished writing it, they quietly whispered it aloud for the very first time. No one else was there to hear it. But those few heartfelt words changed something inside them forever. And what they whispered is the very truth that brings this story to its most unexpected turning point. Some words do not change the world the moment they are spoken. They change the person who speaks them. That was the quiet miracle of that evening. The room remained still. Nothing extraordinary happened outside the window. Yet inside the heart of the person you love, an invisible weight gently lifted. They looked at the final line on the page once more. Then, almost without thinking, they smiled. Not because every uncertainty had disappeared, but because, for the first time in a very long while, they were no longer hiding from their own truth. There is a peaceful strength that arrives when honesty finally replaces hesitation. It does not make every answer appear overnight. It simply allows the heart to breathe again. The person you love folded the page with unusual care, as though they were protecting something far more valuable than paper and ink. They placed it where they knew they could find it again, not as a memory to forget, but as a promise to themselves. A promise that silence would no longer decide their future. Don't skip. Because something beautiful began happening after that quiet promise. The following days felt different in ways that were difficult to explain. The little things they had once overlooked suddenly carried meaning. A familiar song no longer reminded them of what was missing, it reminded them of what was still possible. An evening sky no longer felt lonely, it felt full of quiet expectation. Even ordinary conversations seemed brighter, as though hope had quietly changed the way they listened to the world. And every time your name entered their thoughts, it no longer arrived with uncertainty. It arrived with gratitude. Gratitude for every shared memory. For every conversation they had once taken for granted. For every quiet moment that had slowly built something far stronger than either of you realized. Stay till the end. Because another realization gently unfolded. They understood that love is rarely revealed in a single unforgettable moment. More often, it is discovered through hundreds of small moments that only make sense when viewed together. A smile remembered months later. A thoughtful gesture that refused to fade. A kindness that quietly became the measure by which every future connection was understood. Piece by piece, those memories formed one unmistakable picture. And at the center of that picture was the person they could no longer imagine leaving unspoken. You. Not as a distant hope. Not as an impossible dream. But as someone whose presence had quietly become part of the rhythm of their life. Then something happened that they had not expected at all. While going about an ordinary afternoon, they came across something they hadn't seen in a long time. It wasn't hidden. It hadn't been lost. It had simply been waiting. The moment they looked at it, they laughed softly to themselves. How did I miss this before? That small discovery connected everything. The unfinished conversations. The returning memories. The page they had written. The promise they had made. It all pointed toward one simple realization. Perhaps the right moment had never been somewhere in the future. Perhaps it had been quietly approaching all along. And with that thought came one gentle decision. Before another day passed, they would stop carrying these feelings in silence. They would finally reach toward the person who had unknowingly become the calmest place in their heart. But before they could take that first step, one completely unexpected message arrived. Just a few simple words. Yet the moment they read them, they stood perfectly still. Because those words seemed to answer a question they had never spoken aloud, and everything was about to change.